friends, and welcome back to Wednesday Night Live. I'm sure glad you're here. Good week ahead of us since Friday the 13th came on a Monday, I think, or Sunday I guess it was. So we ought to have a good week. Depending on the rain, we've had a lot of rain recently. I've got a busy night for you, and I hope you have a pencil and paper handy. I've got a couple of things I'd like you to jot down for future reference. Program reminder now, this program airs again Sunday at noon. So I would ask if you missed something or you think, wait a minute, I didn't get a note on that. You can always get it Sunday at noon. And please invite some of your friends and family to watch it also. Also, I very strongly urge you to watch Aaron Hayes with his Christian apologetics on Sunday also at 5 p.m. on this same station. Well, as I do every week at this time, I'm going to start with a quick promotional note for Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, 478-HOPE. And do have a pencil ready because I've got a film I'm going to recommend to you. But first of all, let me just read the mission statement for Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center. Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center is a Christ-centered, nonprofit ministry offering life-affirming alternatives to abortion and compassionate care to those who face pregnancy and abortion-related issues. And I just last week got their summer newsletter, and there's a praise report in there. Look at these two precious babies that have been brought into the world and are now being cared for by their loving mother and with help from Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center. And you can help bring babies into the world. As I've said before, abortion is never an alternative, a good alternative for a live birth. Remember, abortion is not a victimless crime. There's always one dead and one injured. So please, won't you please call 208-478-HOPE and see what you can do to help give hope, compassion and hope to an expectant mother or a new mother or somebody who just needs some guidance. Also, they have their upcoming annual walkathon, and that Walk for Life, that is as always, it's a family event. Compassion and Hope is the family program, kind of a family TV, you know, don't have to bleep anything out. Now they're going to have this on August 1st, so please mark your calendar for August 1st. It's a Saturday. It shouldn't interfere with church or anything else you have going on, and it's from 11 until 2, and it will be at Caldwell Park. And they're going to have lots of stuff. There are raffle and prizes, live music, bouncy house, hot dogs, chips, dessert, snow cones, cotton candy, face painting, coloring contest, games, and more games. It's a free event, but do bring your checkbook and bring a few bucks to help. It is a fundraiser. Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, 478-HOPE. Also, I've been reminding you, and I will continue for the next several weeks, about the Casting for Warriors and their families. Now, this is a program for at beautiful Camp Perkins in the Sawtooth Mountains, beautiful area up there. Happens once a year and is for combat veterans who maybe need a breather, need a little time to get away and get their head together, need some time with their family where they're not interrupted by the world or something like that. It costs about $300 to send a family, and I'm not asking you to do that. If you can, certainly it's something that will be very rewarding to you and to that family. But Casting for Warriors will take place at Camp Perkins August 28th through 30th. So we've got well over a month to prepare for this. Won't you please call Karen Elliott at 221-3243. Karen Elliott is doing a fabulous job putting this together. She has been the lodestone, if that's the proper term, for this whole thing. She's worked very hard for this. She has a son who is a soldier. Karen Elliott, 221-3243. August 28th through 30th of this year for the Casting for Warriors and their families. Now, if you are one of those warriors and families that want to go, you need to get signed up before the end of this month. Let's see, I think it's July 25th. So you have until July 25th to get signed up for this. However, if you're not one of the warriors but you want to help, please call Karen Elliott at 221-3243. Tell her Ralph suggested you call. See what you can do to help. I know you'll be pleased. We owe our veterans so much, and especially these young people that are coming back today from Iraq and Afghanistan. It seems like this unending war that the Obamanist has decided that he's going to lose it for us. thousands of young men and women coming back disfigured, maimed, and all that, and they're really not getting the kind of help they need. And something like this, so simple yet so elegant. 221, what was that number again? I'm going to 221-3243. Please call them. Now, you remember last week I shared with you the letter I got from the little fellow that I'm sponsoring. My wife and I are sponsoring this little guy in Uganda at the school there, Ronald Wakabi. Wonderful letter. This came about because I wanted to share this with you because this was in the Idaho State Journal, July 8th. So what is that? Just a few days ago. So you may still be able to go online and read the full article. It was a great article. Uganda, the Hands for Uganda. Now you can go and you can look it up on the internet, and I urge you to do so. Hands, the number 4, Uganda.org, and look it up and see if you can get involved in that. What a wonderful thing. This has gone from one young woman who had a vision to help these people in Africa, in Uganda, and a dirt poor little community, the disease and all kinds of horrible things happening there, and yet there's a bright light for little guys like this. Girls and boys both are getting educated. They have built a school now. It's not just a little mud hut. It's a real school. By our standards, it would be somewhat primitive. By their standards, it's quite a blessing. And you could help with that kind of a blessing. Hands for, the number 4, Uganda.org. Or look it up. For last week, we talked about the latest travesty, the latest insult to our nation coming out of SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States of America. And I'm sure that most of you who are my viewers, not all of you, but most of you probably are just as disgusted and somewhat dismayed as I am. Now that fight's going to be going on a long time. This has set us up for something evil. Satan is alive and well, and he is doing his will, and he does it through mankind. Satan has no individual power, at least that's the way I understand it, except to lie to men and women and have them accept it and act upon it. That's what homosexuality is, Satan's lies. Well, there's another of Satan's lies, and it's a big one. It's a really big one. It's a threat to the entire world, all of mankind. It's called Islam. And every day there is another insult to humanity that we see about Islam. And I've been warning you, Islam is on the march. It is marching right here in Pocatello. We have some 2,000 Saudi and a few Kuwaiti students, Muslims, at our university. Our little university of 14,000 matriculating students has 2,000 Muslims. That's a pretty big percentage for this little town. This is a potential threat, and I'm going to share some of what that is. In fact, let me just share this. I was reading this a moment ago. This is an article from Investors Business Daily. Great newspaper. Same idea as the Wall Street Journal. I really enjoy Investors Business Daily more, but you can't get it here unless you get it by mail, and it's always 4 days late, and you get 12 papers at once or something. But this is Investors Business Daily, July 7th. Arab Bill Gates could turn Sharia creep into full trot. Islamofascism. Saudi Prince Al-Walid, forgive me, I have trouble with these Arabic names. Al-Walid bin Talal, a senior member of the Saudi monarchy, says he'll pledge his $32 billion fortune to charity. It's not what you think. In light of his past donations, this is a highly concerning development. Al-Walid says he will model his endowment on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, only with a twist. Much of his philanthropic work will help foster cultural understanding of Islam in America and the West. Creeping Islam. That means promoting the kingdom's brand of Islam while censoring criticism of Islam. And I catch flack from certain elements in this community because I've had the audacity to speak out against the Muslims here, who I view as a threat. There's only one way to deal with that threat, and that's to eliminate it. Send them back where they came from. Send them off to Harvard. Let them have them. They have the money. We don't need them here. They do nothing to enhance this community. And the more you and I interact with the Muslims here in town, the more we realize that they do nothing to enhance our community. But I digress. Published reports and books reveal Al-Walid already has pledged millions to radical Muslim Brotherhood Front, front groups that have a secret plan to Islamicize America and spread Sharia throughout the West. These pro-jihad groups can now count on a massive and virtually endless infusion of cash to their war chests. Al-Walid has extensive ties to Brotherhood leaders. For example, he tapped tele-Islamicist Tariq al-Suwaidun, widely reported to be a leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in Kuwait, as the channel director of his Islamic religious TV outlet, Al-Rizala. The network's Supreme Advisory Committee has included Abdullah Omar Nassif, whom ex-federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy says is a major Muslim Brotherhood figure who has helped raise funds for Al-Qaeda. Al-Walid made headlines after 9/11 when he donated $10 million to the World Trade Center Fund, only to have then New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani return the check. Remember that? I was so proud of Rudy. He said, nope, don't need your Muslim money. Take your money. After presenting the money, the Saudi billionaire issued a press statement blaming the terrorist attacks on U.S. support for Israel, while, quote, our Palestinian brethren continue to be slaughtered at the hands of the Israelis. The next year, Al-Walid donated a whopping $27 million to a Saudi telethon for the violent Palestinian intifada against Israel, according to the Clarion Project. Also in 2002, he gave $500,000 to the Washington-based Council on American Islamic Relations, which federal authorities have linked to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. Now this is a very important coming home. In 2005, moreover, he spent $40 million to expand Islamic studies at U.S. colleges. Why do you think we have 2,000 Muslims in the university here? Money. And apparently the university president couldn't care less about the threat. Hey, he just got a $14,000 a year raise, and they're going to give him a new home. So apparently he doesn't care about the threat. It's all about that almighty dollar that we have been spending to buy Arab oil, and now the Arabs are sending Islam to our country with the whole purpose of subjugating us to Sharia. Donating $20 million to Harvard University to create a campus-wide Sharia law studies program, while pumping another $20 million into Georgetown University for a Muslim-Christian understanding. And I'll share a little note on that with you. Muslim-Christian understanding program run by notorious Islamic apologist John Esposito. Despite fawning press reports, Al-Walid's charitable pledge is no cause for celebration. It's cause for alarm. His billions will finance Islamist pressure groups who exist to force Western civilization to yield to Islamic no-go zones, Sharia courts, and blasphemy laws. If unmatched by patriotic philanthropists, the Saudi prince's huge endowment could be a major setback for state and local efforts to push back against Islamization. We are seeing, without really knowing oftentimes, we're seeing creeping Islam happening all the time. A couple weeks ago I showed you a film. I'm going to rerun it tonight. I don't mean to be redundant, but I'm going to run it again tonight because it goes right to the heart of what we're talking about. Josh, are we queued up on that first one? Please pay attention to this. Take some notes.
It's been over 7 years since a church group from another state brought a couple hundred refugees to the rural county where I live. I wanted to know, how could they do this? What was the governmental process that allowed the resettlement of refugees to a county ill-prepared to assimilate them? Employment opportunities were scarce. The health department was not familiar with illnesses and mental health problems of people who came from parts of the third world. The school system was not prepared to teach large numbers of students who didn't speak English, and subsidized housing was scarce. I wanted to know who gave permission for what amounted to a dropping off of needy people in our county seat. So I began my research and posted everything I learned to a blog, Refugee Resettlement Watch, so that others might know what I learned about a federal program that is 35 years old this year. In summary, I discovered that the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees was choosing most of our refugees. It's under the influence of a powerful Muslim supremacist group called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Not surprisingly, a large number of U.S.-bound refugees are coming from countries with large numbers of people who hate us, including Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and soon from Syria, just to name a few. The U.S. State Department then distributes the refugees to 9 major federal contractors, 6 of which are so-called religious charities, but all are largely funded from the U.S. Treasury. They're not passing the plate on Sundays for the $1 billion price tag for the resettlement. And that figure does not include the extensive welfare benefits refugees receive. The refugees are then sent to over 190 cities and towns in the U.S. where the 9 major contractors support 350 subcontractors. The refugees receive help from the subcontractor for up to 6 months, and the subcontractor then submits paperwork to admit the relatives of the first group. As the years have passed, I've become increasingly alarmed by the percentage of problematic Muslim refugees admitted and distributed around the U.S. through this program. By the way, the Refugee Resettlement Program is not the only one used for legally admitting Muslims, but it is one of the most important. Many are forming cities within cities. Perhaps you know one where you live, where mosques are being built to consolidate, train, and promote a growing American Muslim population and its Islamic supremacist doctrine called Sharia. This process of Muslim colonization is called the Hijra. Muhammad told his followers to migrate and spread Islam in order to dominate all the lands of the world. He said they were obliged to do so, and that's exactly what they are doing now with the help and support of the UN, the U.S. State Department, and the Christian and Jewish groups assigned to seed them throughout the country. Your tax dollars pay for it all. I've written this little book, Refugee Resettlement and the Hijra to America, so that you will know what is happening to us and what we can do about it. We only need to look to a troubled Europe to see the path ahead for America if we can't stop this migration and stop it soon. There's no reason on earth that we should have brought over 100,000 Somalis and another 100,000 Iraqi Muslims to America. Soon we will be resettling Syrian Muslims in large numbers. The UN at the moment has over 10,000 in a pipeline destined for our towns. The FBI told Congress recently that they cannot be properly screened. If you don't help counter the Hijra, we are, in my opinion, doomed. Over time, this migration will be more devastating to your children and grandchildren and to our country than any terrorist attack could ever be. Learn more at Refugee Resettlement Watch and SecureFreedom.org.
Now, why is that important? Well, I'm going to tell you in just a moment, but let me just back up to a comment I made a moment ago when I read the thing about this Prince Al-Walid. He said, it said here that he pumped $20 million into Georgetown University for a Muslim-Christian understanding program run by notorious Islamic apologist John Esposito. Well, what does the Quran, what does Islam say about Muslims and non-Muslims being friends, especially when it comes to Muslims, Jews, and Christians? From the Quran, Assad referred to commentators who have provided an explanation for this verse in the Quran. Assad is referring to authoritative Islamic scholars who have written commentaries, tafsirs, on the Quran that Muslims have used for centuries to understand the meaning of each verse. So let's see how some of these authoritative scholars have explained Surah 551. The Tafsir Ibn Kathir explained this verse by pointing out that, quoting, Allah forbids his believing servants from having Jews and Christians as friends because they are the enemies of Islam and his people. May Allah curse them. The Tafsir al-Jalalian explained that this verse meant Muslims were not to join Jews and Christians in mutual friendship and love or in their unbelief. The Tafsir, these are scholars, Ibn Abbas stated that Muslims who take Jews and Christians and friends are not included in Allah's protection and safety. Someone may point out that the above tafsirs were written centuries ago and then claim that the interpretations 551 has surely been modernized. So let's look at 2 modern tafsirs. The Tafsir as-Sadi was written in the early 20th century. Here's how Surah 551 is explained. Allah, while describing to his believing servants the ignorant condition and unethical demeanor of the Jews and the Christians, orders them to not maintain alliance with them. They are your enemies. Now, there's a lot more to this, but I guess you need to understand that Islam is looking through the looking glass of Islam, not to us. In Islam, Muslims are to give respect, love, charity, support, protection, everything to other Muslims. But to non-Muslims, they are to give nothing. And yet what they do is they turn it around and they say, well, don't make friends with the Christians and Jews because they're only loyal to each other. Now, you and I both know as Christians or Jews that certainly in this community and every community in which I've lived, Christians and Jews are usually very welcoming to everybody. They will share with whomever. Certainly Christians, one of the mainstays of Christianity is proselytizing or sharing the gospel of Jesus the Christ. With Jews, it's a little different, but Jews are, I'm a goy boy, and I'm a regular attender at the local synagogue. I am welcomed by the synagogue and by the people there. They know I'm goy. They know that I'm a Christian. They don't shun me or throw me out. We have a difference in politics somewhat, but I have always been made to feel welcome there. Unlike with the Muslims, the Muslims, it kind of goes to that old expression, goes back to a television program from back in the 50s. And the expression that was used at the beginning of the end of the program was, they will pat you on the back with one hand and pick your pocket with the other. Well, there's a similar analogy to the Muslims here. They'll look at you, smile, and call you friend until they outnumber you, and then they will demand that you submit to Islam, that you become a Muslim. Otherwise, the Quran leaves no other alternative. Submit or die. Or, depending on the case, it's not always a good, sure thing, you can become a dhimmi, a taxpayer. In other words, pay ransom or pay a tax protection. Islam is a huge protection racket for non-Christians, for non-Muslims. So, all right, now that kind of brings us forward to our next issue on this. There was an article in the Idaho State Journal on July the 1st, and I'll just read the article and then I'll tell you why this, besides the obvious, why this is important. Conservatives oppose college's refugee program. Now, this is an article from the AP about Twin Falls. Conservative activists are calling for the College of Southern Idaho to remove its refugee program following concerns over the influx of Syrian refugees expected to arrive in south-central Idaho later this fall. The Times News reports that the group formed after college officials announced in April that 300 refugees were expected to resettle in Idaho at the start of the new federal fiscal year. Many of the refugees will possibly come from Syria, leading some community members to speculate they could be radical Muslims. You think? This program is giving the college a bad rap, said Rick Martin, who leads the group called the Committee to End the CSI Refugee Center. Let someone else take it over. Martin has asked CSI board members twice to consider phasing out the refugee program before the end of the federal fiscal year, which ends in the fall. 1 October begins the new federal fiscal year. Martin added that group members plan on going door to door throughout Twin Falls to encourage people to oppose the refugee program being housed inside the community college. Things are going on that the public needs to know about, he said. Just how many refugees come to Idaho and from which countries will be decided by the federal government. In other words, the Obamanist is going to settle people here. They'll make the decision what we're allowed or what we should get. However, resettlement officials have maintained that all incoming refugees undergo extensive background checks. Yep, really? Come on. The community college's refugee center has resettled roughly 5,000 people since the 1980s. I don't know if all 5,000 of those are still in Idaho. If it is, that's about 5,010 too many. College board members have stood by the program. Chairman Carl Kleinkopf says he won't rule out the board considering phasing out the program, but doubts that it will become a future agenda item. This isn't the only group that has sprung up in light of the influx of incoming refugees. Earlier this month, Twin Falls accountant and former Democratic State Treasurer candidate Deborah Silver formed a group to support the refugee center. Members volunteer at the center and help educate the community about the resettlement process. Now, you know, you'd have to live on in a cloud on another planet not to know that what's going on in Syria. And these people coming here are not coming here because they love us. They're coming here for safety from their own people. These people coming here are not Christians, they're not Jews, they're Muslims. And I believe these are Sunnis. You know, you've got the battle between the Shiites, which is Iran, the Sunnis, which are the Saudis, and Syria, I believe, Syria is Alawites, and I'm not sure how they play in there with the Sunnis. But you've got intertribal fights going on over there, and the Christians are really taking it in the neck. In fact, entire villages of Christians are being slaughtered. And our government is sitting on its hands, the Obamanist, sitting on its hands while John Kerry, that joke from the past, is in Iran or in Switzerland, wherever they're meeting, to make a deal with Iran. What kind of a deal? The only deal we should be making is cut them off at the neck. You kill a snake by cutting off its head. I get a little bit passionate about this. Anyway, so these Muslims that are coming in here, they're not coming here because they love us. They're coming here because they can gain protection under our Constitution, which they want to replace with Sharia and give them some breathing room until they can either attack us and try to enforce Sharia, or if they can get back to Syria somehow after everybody there is dead and it's all over. This is a 14th century old, this is nothing new. The fact that we're being used as a dumping pot is something new. Now, Rick Martin gave me a call about a week and a half ago, and he brought me up to date a little bit on what's going on there. I met Rick a couple years ago. I can't say that I know him, but I've met him once or twice. And part of why he called was he wanted to know how my wife and I had started the referendum to try to get rid of the non-discrimination ordinance, which I still contend is bad law. Hasn't been tested yet, but the day will come. But he wanted to know how we did that, because they're trying to decide whether to do an initiative or a recall in Twin Falls. I suggested they do an initiative if they're going to do anything. Treasure Valley and Twin Falls has been dumped on big time. Now, we already have 2,000 Muslims at the university. They've been dumped on us, so to speak, by President Velas and his happy gang of federal dollars or Saudi dollars intake personnel, and they couldn't care less about this community. Mark my words, what's going to happen, it's trying to happen, but it will. What's going to happen is somebody within this community, somebody who is Muslim, has money and influence, is going to develop property where Muslims can come and live after they get out of college or while they're going to college, and they will make a canton or they will make a ghetto where they can live and have their own lives as Muslims, in reinforcing their own values, excluding America, and having their own Sharia law within that. And that can happen here, folks. Don't think for a moment it can't. And the wheels are in motion, the die is cast. When we started recruiting these Muslims to go to school here, the handwriting was already on the wall. Well, let's get back to what's going on in Treasure Valley. This has gotten to the point where it is so serious that recently there's a television program on public television, just like mine is, that comes out of Boise. It's called Gem State Patriot. And I think the guy's name is Neugebauer. I think it's Neugebauer. I've not seen him before. I've heard of him, but I've not seen him. But I have a clip I think you'll find fascinating and very illuminating. Please watch this. Folks, you cannot fight the enemy if you don't know what they're doing. Neugebauer is interviewing former State Senator Russ Fulcher. Thank you, Josh. Let's go on this one.
To you by the Gem State Patriot. My name's Bob Neugebauer. My guest for today is former Senator and gubernatorial candidate Russ Fulcher. Thank you for taking the time to come here today, Russ, and visit with us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Bob. Good to see you.
It's always nice to see you.
We
don't get to spend enough time together. You're always too busy.
I know. We've got to work on that.
I wanted to start this morning's conversation off with a topic that's really been hot here in Idaho, and it has to do with the resettling of 2,000 Syrian refugees here. I know you've been talking about this up in eastern Idaho on a radio show. I understand Idaho has been picked to resettle as many as 2,000 refugees, although they're trying to keep the numbers lower.
Right.
But this will be in the Twin Falls, Boise area. Is there anything we can do, and what's the inherent risk of accepting these refugees, because they've not been cleared by their own government?
Right. And Bob, here's maybe just a premise for that whole thing, Bob. The America, of course, has been a haven for refugees for since its inception. And the difference now is that potentially those that are coming to our country they don't want to assimilate. Years ago, when people came to America, they made a big push. They wanted to be Americans. They wanted to join American culture. They wanted to be part of our system and come for a better lifestyle. What we're seeing now is an immigration policy and immigrants who they want to change our nation. They want to make it like where they came from. They want to maintain or grow their own culture. That's probably my biggest fear with potentially some of these new immigrants being placed in.
Well, we call it an immigration policy. I call it an infiltration policy. Because Obama's talking about bringing in 30,000 Syrian Islamists to resettle here over the next year or two. And I don't think that's going to be of any benefit to anybody in this country.
There are some things we can do.
Okay.
And you're right. We talked about this in eastern Idaho just last week, and it's a big topic there. But first thing is we made English the official language of the state of Idaho here a few years ago. That was one of the bills that I sponsored. But it needs to go a step further. That English language, that legislation needs to be made such that the government documents just get printed in English. That'll be an encouragement so that immigrants will learn the language, and that's something that we want to part of meld in with our culture here. Another thing we can do is we can do some background checks. I think you pointed out that some of these folks potentially coming, they're not cleared by their own government, and we need to know who they are. I think that's just wise policy overall. The other thing we need to do, and this can be done legislatively as well, is when we have immigrant students in our schools, there's a tendency to create a parallel curriculum to accommodate.
Right.
Let's not do that. Let's maintain the curriculum that we have, not do anything special there. At the same time, there's you don't want to just make a blanket statement. These are people too, and there's potentially some good folks, but at the same time, I think precautions are necessary. We got enough turmoil on a worldwide stage, especially coming from that part of the world. We need to take some precautions. Isn't
that going to put some pressure on our educational systems and our infrastructure here, bringing that many people into the Boise, Twin Falls area?
No question about it. And you probably have seen how some of the folks in Southern California have reacted to this big flow, and Arizona have flown. They've reacted to that big flow of immigration, and we just need to be wise about it. And I'm not sure that our federal government is being all that wise.
Well, I don't think they're being wise, because we're going to wind up paying for this through our taxes anyway. They're going to subsidize these people for over a year. Now, that includes all of the benefits that you would get if you were on welfare, and then some on top of it for their resettlement. And I don't think anybody actually knows what we're paying for this.
Yeah, there's a cost, and that cost is undefined, but it's going to fall on the back of the taxpayer that's on the rolls right now. I thought of one other thing, Bob, that is important that needs to be done here. There's a piece of legislation out there that is American law for American courts.
Right.
And this arguably should have been run a few years ago. And when I was in the Senate, I actually saw this bill, and there wasn't the urgency. But what we've seen in other states is in particular when the Islam population comes in, they will congregate, not surprisingly, and in some cases they will start adhering to just their internal legal system and ignoring the one that's there in the state or wherever they're at. That can't happen here. We need to, if someone's going to live in America, they need to operate by American laws, and that should be something that we etch into our statute.
Have you talked with Senator Crapo or Rich or either of our representatives, our congressmen, about this and what they're going to try and do about it?
Bob, I have not, and that's probably something that I should be doing, and that clearly that's really falls in their camp on being the federal delegation, and so it's a good point. I've not done that.
But I haven't heard anything from our governor. I haven't heard anything from our Speaker of the House. You know, we heard a lot about the 58,000, not refugees, but illegal aliens we have here. We talk about them all the time, but I don't hear an awful lot of banter about these Syrians. And the other question I have is, why aren't we looking to bring the persecuted Christians in here rather than the Islamics? I don't quite understand that, and why we're allowing the Islamists to come in when we know that these have been problem childs for years. We know we've got ISIS groups here. You know, how do you control it? And how do you keep an eye, a close watch? It's bad enough with what we have with 58,000 illegal aliens. We don't know which ones used to be Muhammad that are now Emmanuel.
Well, and that can happen. I was watching, or I was reading some information about the immigration path for a lot of the folks who come in through the Middle East. Oftentimes they'll go through Mexico, where you can relatively easily purchase a legitimate passport.
Right.
And that's transpiring. But to your point, we have a situation which arguably, I won't know what to say it's the first in my lifetime, but it's certainly at a level of urgency that it never has been in my lifetime, where you have a stated organization that is committed to a stated committed purpose and mission of eliminating the United States and Christianity, and which is the foundational religion of our nation. And in certain parts of the world, they're succeeding at it. And so it is only wise and responsible, and there's an obligation for our leadership to take some steps. We're not trying to just, slam the door so that there's no pathway whatsoever, because undoubtedly there's some good people who are legitimately trying to get out for the right reasons. Okay, but let's take some precautions because we could be importing our enemy.
Well, I do believe that they're going to wind up having some enemy within that group of 30,000. You're going to find a few rotten apples in every group that big. The troubling part of all this is Obama's administration's total disregard for Christians seeking asylum. We've got Christians seeking asylum, but there doesn't seem to be an open path for them to come here. And by the same token, aren't we a sovereign state? Do we not get to decide who gets to settle here and who doesn't?
That's a very interesting question, and frankly, that was the next point I was going to bring up. One thing that I have not heard about is who is determining what the number of immigrants is? Who's determining the location of where those immigrants go? What has been the role of the state? What has been the role of state leadership? I don't know the answers to those questions. However, to your point, there is an obligation, I believe, and a responsibility of our own state leadership and the right to be a factor in making those decisions.
Well, I would think so, but again, the only ones I seem to hear from are Mayor Beater, who has said, welcome, come on in. The door is open. And when you go back and think about Idaho itself, it was settled many years ago by a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. I'm not against allowing people to come into the United States, but we are carrying this to the nth degree. We're taking it to a point where we're not going to be able to afford to take care of ourselves and everybody else who wants to come in here, because everybody wants to come here. But everybody that comes here says they're not bringing their baggage. And the big sign on their baggage says, we're coming to change it.
Well, and of course, the large picture of the impact of immigration policy goes into many other areas. I mean, what is the cost to the existing taxpayer on the education system? What is the cost to the existing taxpayer on the transportation system, on the medical system? People want to come to America in some cases because, yes, it is a land of opportunity, and you can control your destiny to a degree. but there are also those who are coming here because it's a land of benevolence. And the programs that we have set up in undue fashion provide care and at the expense of other folks, and it just needs to be changed.
Well, there's a big sign hanging outside of America, whether anybody realizes it. Come here for all the freebies. You don't have to work. You don't have to do anything. You just sign up with the government program, and there you have it, free and clear.
You know, there's a state senator in California that I've gotten to know over the years, and from the Los Angeles area, and he's been in office for some time, and we were having a conversation here not long ago, and he was talking about how the political landscape has changed due to immigration policy, and how the state of California simply doesn't have the appetite to do reforms because they don't have the numbers anymore. In that state, the influence of that immigration policy has crippled the ability for them to go in and do significant reforms, and that can happen in Idaho just as easily as it did in California.
Well, this is one of the reasons the liberal progressives are winning this battle, because we continue to allow them to basically change our country from the ground up. Whether it's immigrations from Mexico or immigrations from Vietnam or wherever it might be, now it's Syria. The only way you stop this is to have a real solid immigration policy with limits. And put that sign out, turn that neon sign out that says it's free, and make them think you don't want to come to a place if you can't resettle and have money to resettle, have a place to bring your family to, have the schools open to you. If we change some of the policies that the liberal progressives have put in place, we might actually be able to stop them from coming in or make it not that nice a place to go to, because you have to work.
Yeah. So why is it that that the issue with America is always dealing with the influx, not the outflow? I mean, there's a reason for that.
Well, 3,200 expatriates in 2013. They're not leaving in droves, but for every 3,200 to go out, 32,000 come in.
Yeah, and let's not forget, with an $18+ trillion debt.
Right.
We fiscally can't afford it, the policies to continue. We culturally can't afford those policies to continue. And just, you know, I'm not a huge, well, let me back up. Ann Coulter is kind of a controversial figure from time to time, but I caught an interview, or at least a portion of one, that she had on this topic here just within the last few days, and apparently she's written a book about this. But she points out the fact that, similar to what you did, that with this influx, in particular the Middle Eastern cultures, in many ways, those are flawed cultures, and they're coming in and they're influencing ours, and in particular some of the abuses on women and minorities. And so anyway, big topic, and we need to be addressing it at the state level as well as the federal level.
Well, I think we have to address it at a state level. I don't see anybody really doing that. I'd love to see somebody come out and say something. But everybody wants to become elected again. So they worry about the minority vote. They're worried about the immigrants' vote. You know, pretty soon we'll be issuing everybody driver's licenses. You realize if this amnesty goes through, 23,000 of those 58,000 illegals in Idaho are going to be able to get driver's license, get their green cards. I mean, he's going to make them American citizens.
And let's not forget the underlying purpose of a lot of this is they'll also be able to vote.
That's the key point. That's the key point.
And so when that transpires, once again, that changes the landscape, and it creates an unhealthy addiction for those who are depending on government as a provider instead of what you and I realize government is really a consumer.
Well, we'll have to see what happens, Russ. Thank you very much for coming here today, and we'll have you back shortly.
My pleasure. Look forward to it, Bob.
Well, you can see it's not just a concern for yours truly, Ralph Lillig. It's a concern that whose time has come. And folks, if we don't make our voices heard, if we're not willing to speak up, we're going to get what we deserve. And if you don't defend yourself, then you deserve to be injured. And we're going to be injured severely. It's already gotten to the point where the Muslim students at ISU are bad citizens. They're not good guests. I hear horror stories all the time about things that they're doing, many of which I've shared with you. By the way, I have to back up and ask you to make a note of something I should have told you at the very top of the program. Rather than have it forgotten, I'm going to tell you now, and then we'll get back to this. I would suggest strongly, if you are pro-life, if you are for life, there's a movie that you can see. You should share it with your family. It's an excellent family movie. It's a great movie. I'm recommending it. It's called October Baby. I don't know if you've ever heard it. I just saw it the other day. My wife had been trying to get me to watch it for some time, and I wasn't interested. I didn't want to watch Touchy Feel Good or something. Finally, out of desperation, I said, okay, let's watch it and get it over with. I am so glad that she's not what I would call a henpecker, but she did stay on me about this, and I'm so glad she did. October Baby. Look it up. I think we got it on Netflix. I'm sure it's available elsewhere. It is a wonderful movie. Now, I have to ask you, in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie, you're probably going to say, oh, give me a break. Don't turn it off. Had my wife not told me, hang in there, I would have turned it off. I'm so glad I didn't. October Baby, pro-life, wonderful movie. Now, let's get back to where we were. The things that we've been hearing about our local guests have not been flattering. They don't give me a great deal of hope. But let's just show you how deeply we are being affected by creeping Islamization, creeping Sharia. It's getting to, and it happens. Do you remember the old story about the frog in the water? Put a frog in a pan of water and then you slowly heat it, and the frog will allow you to boil it to death because it's so gradual it doesn't realize he's being heated. That's what we're seeing here. And if my prediction comes true about this housing setup or whatever it is, where they can have a ghettoization of Muslims here, heaven help us. And I mean that in the literal sense. Now, here's something that you may or may not be aware of. Recently, Muslims had their annual Ramadan. Ramadan is little known to Westerners and really isn't important to Christians and Jews. It's not something we could give we don't give a rip about it. But we're supposed to be nice to each other during Ramadan, because if we're not, it offends our Muslim friends. Of course, they can care less about being nice to us during Christmas and Easter, but they're Muslims. They are untouchable. Well, this is kind of something kind of interesting. Remember, I made a statement last time we met. I told you, based on the homosexualization of the military, don't encourage your children to join the military. It's becoming a degenerate cesspool. Sexpool would have gone to. It's becoming a cesspool. Well, we're seeing other things that are happening in the same way. I recall, and I share with you, when I was called up, activated for Desert Storm. And I shared this with you once before. I just reiterate because of its significance. As I was going through the processing line, I had a Bible and a little neck piece that I used to wear. And I put them on the table so that they could inventory them. And the lady on the other side started to put them away, and I said, well, no, give them back to me. She said, I can't. I said, what do you mean you can't? She said, well, you're going into Saudi Arabia, and they don't allow any Christian stuff in there. I can't tell you, well, I mean, I really can't express the depth of how it hit me, but it hit me with such gravity. I said, if they want me to come over there and defend their country, then they can let me have my Bible. And they said, no, we can't do it. I said, good, I'm not going. She said, well, you can't not go. And I said, yes, I can. Well, you know the consequences. I said, I'll take the consequence. I'm not going to Saudi Arabia if I can't bring my Bible. I don't give a rip whether they like it or not. Now, this shows, now that was in 1992, was it? Was that when we got activated? It shows how things have changed. This is from the Weekly Standard, June 26th. U.S. troops face eating, drinking restrictions during Ramadan, by Jerry Beer. A top commander in Southwest Asia reminds U.S. military personnel stationed in Muslim countries in the Middle East of the restrictions placed on them during Ramadan. According to a report by the U.S. Air Force's Central Command Public Affairs, Brigadier General John Quintus 380th Air Expeditionary Wing Commander in Southwest Asia, said that the U.S. is committed to the concepts of tolerance, freedom, and diversity. Of course, he forgot to add that the Muslims are not. But he added that soldiers should become more informed and appreciative of the traditions and history of the people in this region of the world. Remember, we are guests here, and that the host nation is our shoulder-to-shoulder brothers and sisters in arms, risking their lives for our common cause to defeat terrorism. What a bunch of hooey. The only time the Saudis risk anything is if they don't have any choice. They are not our friends. They're using us. They're using the money that we spent on their petrol dollars that they spent to subvert our nation, and yet we send our boys and girls to their nation in the name of supposedly of freedom, and then we have to kowtow to their religion. I'm sorry, it doesn't work for me. During the 30-day religious celebration of Ramadan, even non-Muslims are expected to obey local laws regarding eating, drinking, and using tobacco in public. Violators can be fined up to $685 or receive 2 months in jail. A spokesperson for the United States Central Command, CENTCOM, said that we are not aware of any specific instances of anyone being arrested for such violations. For military personnel outside of U.S.-controlled areas, the only exceptions for the rules are for those performing strenuous labor. Such personnel are authorized to drink and consume as much food as they need to maintain proper hydration and energy. Isn't that wonderful that the Muslims are going to let us eat and drink as long as we're serving them? It is unclear what constitutes strenuous labor or whether additional exceptions might be made during a heat wave affecting some areas of the region that has taken hundreds of lives. When asked if the restrictions were new or simply a continuation of past policy, a CENTCOM spokesperson replied, "There has been no change in policy. While the U.S. does have a status of forces agreement with the UAE, it is common practice to ensure all soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines deployed to Muslim countries are culturally aware that during the month of Ramadan, practicing Muslims do not consume anything from sunrise to sunset as a pillar of their faith. Commanders throughout the AOR, area of operations, create policies to ensure their subordinates respect the laws and culture of our host at all times." The report on CENTCOM's website is accompanied by the following graphic urging military personnel to respect Ramadan. And then you've got this this graphic that goes up for all of the military people to see. Respect Ramadan. I find it distasteful is a very kind word, that the Muslims always expect everyone else to kowtow to them or they're offended, but they don't seem to have any problems with offending us or any of our religious beliefs or anything else. And you remember this from July 3rd, 8 suspects held in beach resort attack. That's from the Wall Street Journal World Watch. 8 people are in custody in Tunisia suspected of having direct links to a deadly beach attack that killed 38 people. But 4 other possible suspects have been released, a minister said. The British Foreign Office raised the death toll of British tourists killed in Friday's attack from 27 to 30. Other European tourists were among the dead. The attack was Tunisia's deadliest. Islamic State claimed responsibility for the attack in which a Tunisian student, Saifuddin Rezgui, opened fire on a beach in the resort of Sousse. He was killed by police. Government Minister Kamal Gendoubi said Thursday the 7 men and 1 woman still detained are suspected of direct links to the attack. He didn't identify them or describe their roles. And then from the Associated Press in Nigeria, Boko Haram kills 97 at mosque prayers. Now remember, these people are killing each other as much as, well, they're slaughtering Christians and Jews. That they're killing other Muslims that don't conform to their form of Christian or of Muslim. Boko Haram extremists gunned down nearly 100 Muslims praying in mosques in a northeast Nigerian town, a government official said, and self-defense fighter said. The attack, which took place Wednesday in the town of Kukwa, came a day after the Islamic extremist group attacked a village 22 miles away, killing 48 men and boys, according to witnesses who counted the dead. And those were Christians. These people are not civilized. They're animals. They're beasts. They're lower than amoeba, except that they're vicious and horrible, and they're, well, there's no need. Now, there's a world of difference. I'm not a preacher. I don't profess to being holier than thou or anything else. I have my beliefs, and I will share them oftentimes if you ask me, sometimes when you don't. It occurred to me yesterday in church, Sunday in church, when we were listening to the gospel from Mark. And I'm going to share this very quick, but this is familiar to you. Then Jesus went around teaching from village to village. Calling the 12 to him, he sent them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over all evil spirits. These were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra tunic. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave as a testimony against them. They went out and preached that people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. Contrast that to what Islam has to say. It is not the function of Islam to compromise with the concepts of Jahiliyyah, the society of unbelievers, which are current in the world, or to coexist in the same land together with a Jahili system. Islam cannot accept any mixing with Jahiliyyah. Either Islam will remain or Jahiliyyah. No half-half situation is possible. Command belongs to Allah or otherwise to Jalila. Allah's Sharia law will prevail or else people's desires. And if they do not respond to you, then know that they only follow their own lusts. And who is more astray than those who follow his own lust without guidance from Allah? Verily, Allah guides not the people who are disobedient. The foremost duty of Islam is to depose Jahiliyyah from the leadership of man with the intention of raising human beings to that high position of which Allah has chosen for him. And how do they depose him? Well, let's see what it says about how they depose Jahiliyyah. And I'm probably not saying the word right, but it's how they depose non-Muslim by jihad. Jihad means war against kafirs. Kafirs is non-believers to establish Islam. Quran, Surah 2:16. You are commanded to fight although you dislike it. You may hate something that is good for you and love something that is bad for you. Allah knows and you do not. You are commanded to fight those. During Jesus' 3-year ministry, he never fought anybody. He only welcomed to forgiveness through repentance. By contrast, every place that Muhammad went, he murdered and slaughtered. We'll see you next with another important report. In the meantime, God bless you and yours. Have a good, safe week. Thank you for joining us. Good night.